Egypt.
Egypt, right.
I got
So
it.
this story
Asia.
is actually
Now, what
a
was
little
this?
bit about Egypt.
Can I help carve?
Okay. So in the desert
The desert isn't fun.
is actually a pretty dangerous place.
Smirks and raw.
You explain to us.
Yes, I
Last
explained to
time.
him last time, but a few of you weren't here. So
Yeah, we
the desert shifts in the wind,
And there's no landmark.
and there is no landmarks,
So
right?
you can't
So
find your way.
one day you go, oh, my house is over next to that big hill, and then
And
we wake
it's
up the next
gone.
day, the hill is gone because the wind has moved the sand.
Then
So
where's
it's
the
very
sun?
hard.
China?
It's very hot in the desert. Very hot. So you have to wear special clothes so that your skin doesn't burn. And when the wind kicks, the sand hits your face and it stings, and then your heat. And so you have to wear lots of long clothes, even though it's hot. Typically white robes with things around your face to keep the sand from getting into you. Do you think anything grows in the desert?
Yeah.
Cactuses do.
Very little grows in the
Are you
desert.
still
There are a few things.
A lot of rock.
no water?
But it's very hard
Well,
to find food,
It rains sometimes.
and it's very hard to find water, right? And so if you happen to live in the desert, you are very brave. So there was God's people. God's people were the Jewish people, and they lived in
They're
the place.
big people.
They're very big people.
Are they?
No, they're using your imagination.
They are naked. Yeah,
And
no,
they are naked. They're two girls.
And so these people lived in the desert, but they were having a difficulty finding food. And their children were having difficulty finding food. And their children would go to bed at night crying because they were hungry. And so the mothers and the fathers decided that we have to find food for our children. And so they decided that the best thing, even
Great
though it was
parenting.
dangerous, was to take their family across the desert to a place that they had heard of called Egypt.
No, don't do it.
And so they headed long journey, day by day, marching through the sand, heading to this place known as Egypt. And when they got to Egypt, they found food. And they found water and places to live. Now, in Egypt, they had a king. His king, they called him the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh saw the people who came into his land and said, you can't go anywhere else. You must stay on my land, and you must do what I tell you to do. You must get up when I tell you to get up. You must eat when I tell you to eat. You must work when I tell you to work. You must sleep when I tell you to sleep. And these people who had come to Egypt to find food and shelter for their family were trapped and became the Pharaoh's slaves, right? And so time passed, and they wanted to leave this place of Egypt, and they no longer wanted to be slaves. And so there was one of them amongst them who had actually known the Pharaoh because he had been raised in the Pharaoh's castle, if you want to call it, the palace, I think is more in Egypt. And his name was Moses. And so Moses would go up to the Pharaoh and be the spokesman for God's people. And he said, dear Pharaoh, let my people go.
Oh, I would know this story.
And so the Pharaoh goes, no. Moses says, my God is not going to be pleased.
And then he poisons.
And so later Moses leaves, and later on there was going out to the water to get some, filling up our buckets to get something to drink, and they noticed that there's blood in the water. The water now is red. God has sent a plague, the first plague.
Well, actually, wasn't the first one. She's telling a story. She's telling a story.
So the plague, the water turned,
plague.
the blood turned, the water turned into blood. And then, after a while, Moses went back to Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh says, let my people go.
It's not fair.
And Pharaoh said, no, I'm not letting your people go. Moses says, okay, you're going to anger my God again. And so so he went back, and God sends another plague. Frogs. Everywhere.
Frogs in the desert.
Frogs. Everywhere. Frogs.
It jumped on the Pharaoh's head. Like frogs.
He jumped on his head, possibly. And so the city was covered with frogs. And Moses says, okay, it's time to go back to the Pharaoh. So he heads back to the Pharaoh. And he asks, Pharaoh, let my people go. And the Pharaoh says, no, not letting them go. He says, okay, you're going to anger my God. And so Moses goes back. And God sends another plague. This time, gnats, flies everywhere. Have you ever seen love bugs here in Florida? Imagine that, like the bugs everywhere. Like when you're walking, bugs everywhere.
Oh yeah, I've seen that before.
Pretty not fun, right? So Moses now says, okay, maybe the Pharaoh will let us go now. So he heads back and asks the Pharaoh, Pharaoh, let my people go.
He said no.
And he did. He said no. Can you believe it? We've had our water turn to blood. We've had frogs. We've had gnats. What else could happen?
A dragon.
Well, actually, you know that we actually sent 10 total plagues. So some of the plagues.
No, keep going, keep telling us the flags.
Telling you the plagues. Well, which one? Do you remember which one is next?
Yes.
Oh,
Grass. No,
It's
that's
good.
There was
Yellow?
one where the plague, where he went back and it killed all the
Yes.
livestock of the animals. So the cows and the sheep and the goats all passed away. And still, Moses goes up to the Pharaoh and says, let my people go. And he's like, nope, I'm not going to let them go.
Hell.
Hell, that's right. Hell was another one. Imagine big chunks of ice and
As big as baseball.
just falling and hitting
Or
and
footballs.
hurting. Very dangerous to walk outside, and you have only tents that we're living in. It's very dangerous, right?
Next one's
But yet, Moses goes to the Pharaoh and says, let my people go. And he says, no,
No.
I'm not going to let you go.
So
Red dumps on everybody.
Boils,
is
very
that?
good. That's
Boils.
right.
Oh,
And so,
Well, it's
Boil.
lucky because the ice is on the ground, and if you step on it with your foot, it wouldn't burn. It would just be cold.
it would be cold. But the next one was boils. So how would you like to have red sores growing up on your
that's
skin?
what that was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like boars.
That's
like
what that
pig
was.
grease.
I thought it
Painful.
was chicken pox.
They get them
Like chicken pox was bigger.
Because I was reading
They're
a
big like
picture, and
bugs,
the
like
pig got him, and then he went in the water, and it was all
Yeah.
and then.
Exactly. And so Moses goes back after the boils to the Pharaoh. He says, let my people go.
He's like locusts.
And guess what the Pharaoh says?
Locusts.
Nope.
No. And so God brings the locusts.
What's locusts?
They critters like
Like
big.
big crickets.
Yeah, they showed us pictures of locusts.
Yeah.
They are humongous.
They're really
I
big
saw like
crickets.
five like this big. I see.
Yeah. Not that big, but big locusts. Big crickets.
This big?
Everywhere. Crickets
seen them.
everywhere.
This big.
And so he goes back out to Pharaoh and says, let my people go.
No.
So we
He
had,
only has 4 of them. Why would
so
he?
we
just
had
take the first
9
one?
plagues, and then the 10th one,
They killed
Moses-
his son.
Moses goes back and tells
Well,
all of the people, says, go to your homes and mark your doors with the blood of a lamb and a
Oh, I
cross
know what
sign.
this was. Oh, and then
And
he says, your son is gonna be killed.
that's
And
right.
then they put blood, and it looks like handprints.
Mhm.
And then there's a speech. Yeah,
That's right.
He says,
So that night when they went to sleep, the angel of death moved through Egypt, and everywhere he saw the marking of the Lamb of God with the blood on the door, he passed by that house. But if he didn't see that marking, he went into the house, and the firstborn son
Ricky.
died.
No.
Poor
Every single house would go in and died. And even in the Pharaoh's house, his son perished.
I knew.
Now, how sad when you wake up the next morning and every one of your neighbors has lost a child.
But not them. Because they had.
That's why didn't they lose a child? Well, the reason they didn't lose a child is they were following God's orders.
They were left with the
So Moses goes back to the Pharaoh one last time and says, "Let my people go."
No.
Yes. Yes.
He says yes this time. He's afraid.
Why didn't he say it the first time? Even though that he has only 4 people.
You know, he was a Pharaoh and he thought he was very powerful.
It's not just 4 people. It's like whole bunches of people.
That's right. There were like thousands of people here, hundreds
I thought it was
right?
only those 4 people. Like,
Yes, you have to use your
How would
imagination.
you
I don't think
say
I
it
can
the
get
first time?
100 in my board.
there's thousands and thousands.
But
But this time, Pharaoh says, "Yes, go. Get out of here. Get out. Go. We're done."
How come the other
And so
How would the
God's
other girl?
people was like, "Okay, hurry. Let's pack. Let's get out of here before the Pharaoh changes his mind." And Moses starts to lead them out. And they're now so happy. And they keep walking and walking. And they're trying to get.
ocean.
Yeah, well, it's a river, right? A big, really big one. And they think, "Oh gosh, we're free. We're out of Egypt. Yay." And then all of a sudden they hear pounding and thunder of chariots. Now, who would be in chariots?
God. Pharaoh.
The Pharaoh, that's right.
Moses people.
And his army, right, Coco?
Yeah.
Why?
And so
He changed his
he changed his mind. Here's these people, and their God has sent all of this terrible things to our people in Egypt, and even killed my son. I'm going to get even with them. And so the chariots came, and all of a sudden God's people were in panic because they come to this river, and they have nowhere else to go. The river's too deep and too wide to pass. And the army is coming behind them, ready to kill them. And so Moses prayed and spoke and asked God for help.
Open it up.
And the river opens,
Or like in
begins to roll up
That looks so weird.
Not.
and creates a passage for God's people. And Moses starts leading them through this river. Chariots are still behind, going, and people start to run across and she's happy that she got across safely. God saved her. And this person is scared, but he's still running across because he believes in God's going to take care of him. And this person is very confused, but he's still running across, really hoping that. And this person is really afraid. Oh my gosh, please don't let that water fall on top of me. Oh my gosh. There were so many emotions, but every one of God's people crossed, and then all of a sudden the river began to flow back.
And Pharaoh's people weren't in it.
And Pharaoh's people, some of them were in it and went
Pharaoh
down
in
with
it?
the water.
Yes,
And other people weren't, and they couldn't get across. And so God's people were saved.
So Pharaoh was under the water.
Why can't they
No.
build a boat
He
with
could've
the tools they have around them?
Or they could just stand up.
It would take a long time.
So it
Right.
takes too
They
long
drunk.
for the and they come down.
Oh no, they would just throw sand into the water.
Not take too long though.
Raise your hand, guys.
Like,
Hey guys, all great discussion. Let's raise our hand, okay? Yes, Elizabeth.
There could have been a because he was normally one of the first people to go. And so he would actually be the first one to get them underwater.
Another possibility. Coco, did you have a question? No. Okay. So that is our story about Moses leading the people out of Egypt. Now there's a great song. Now, and I wasn't